Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, Ahmed. How are you?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. And how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, actually, thank you so much for being with us as well. It was very important to us because we couldn't make it last year. So finally, we could have you here. So we are really happy to see you.
Yeah, I'm super happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much too. So since our time has arrived, I think I can just leave the stage to you. And if you need any assistance, I'll be here again, and I will just get online even without your asking, most probably. Yeah, welcome again.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. And hi everyone. It's so good to be here. It's been a while since I've done a virtual talk, so I am slightly rusty, but hopefully it goes well. I have so much love for Turkey, and it's a place that I tend to go and visit a lot. So I'm really, really excited to be here virtually. Today, I'm here to talk to you all about crawlability and indexability. But if anyone has attended any of my talks before, you know that I tend to stray a little bit away from the technical side and kind of hop into some of the people side of things. So let's see how today goes. All right. So something I want to talk to you about today is it's just something that took me a while to wrap my head around in general. And it was because I spent quite a lot of time working on aggregator websites. So like aggregator marketplace type of websites, ones that tend to have millions and millions and millions of indexed pages. So something that I came to realize that we are in control of how Google can crawl and index our websites. But if you look up, like the main documentation on Google Search Console of what is the 3 stages of Google search, it kind of tells you something like this. So it explains that initially the process of crawling happens where Google downloads text, images, videos, and they do that through crawlers. And then the second step is indexing, and this is where Google then analyzes, text, images, video files, and so forth, and it might or might not choose to store that information in its index, right? And then the third is what the user finds, right? This is serving search results. So when a user searches on Google, Google then returns information that is relevant to the user query, correct? So in very, very, very simple terms, this is basically what it looks like. You crawl, you index, you rank. You crawl, you might or might not index, and then you might or might not rank. So even though, we partly as SEOs, we can put a lot of rules in place and we can be in control of how Google crawls and indexes our websites, it's something that can be really scary. And the reason is, it's just one of those things that can either make or break a website. It's especially with like big, large aggregator marketplace type of sites. What ends up being crawled, what ends up being indexed can have a huge impact on like the technical debt of a website. So something we tend to do as SEOs, and I myself have done that mistake in the past, which is, send over 100-page technical audits when we recommend SEO fixes. But the thing is, specifically with aggregator or marketplace websites, if there is a crawlability or an indexability issue, like we need to kind of stand back and make sure that we hone in the recommendations that we provide. So we really need to focus on prioritizing recommendations that are actually going to have an impact. So let's set the scene of the talk here. So let's imagine, this fictional car aggregator website, right? Let's say we work for a car aggregator website. And some of the things that our users can do on this website is, they can search for cars near their location. They can filter the search results, and they can do that by make, by model, by year, type, transmission, engine size, color. Like they can do all kinds of like filtering. They can view car listings and contact sellers. They can view car history information. So they can go in and write like a registration number and see some of the car history information. And they can read, the latest car news, like in your typical type of blog or so forth. So that's a lot of stuff that the users can do on a website. But most websites, specifically like aggregator type of sites, they tend to be set up in 2 ways, right? So they either attempt to index absolutely everything, all their pages, because what they want to do is they want to capture as much ranking opportunity as possible, right? Or they might say, no, you know what? I'm just going to no index a huge chunk because I want to avoid suffering from index bloat. The problem is, if we attempt to index everything, what tends to happen then is we might end up indexing like every possible geolocation and every possible filter combination, all the car listing pages, all the car history information pages, right? And what's going to happen at that point? Like the problem is, if we go back to that, crawl index rank, like will Google actually bother crawling? This is like 50 million plus pages. Is Google going to bother crawling all of this, right? And let's say it does in some fictional world, right? Will it bother indexing all of those? And more importantly, like, do we even want to rank for every single like geolocation filter combination? Like, is that going to bring us traffic? Like, does that make sense? So the answer is probably no, which means that if we attempt to index everything, what's going to happen is Google might not crawl all of our pages. They might not index all of our pages, and our valuable pages, like the ones that really matter to us, they might not end up being crawled or indexed. And more importantly, like they might not even end up ranking. So this doesn't seem much of an option, right? This idea of attempting to index everything to capture as much ranking opportunity as possible, like it's just not going to work that way. So then the second option we have is this idea of, well, what about we try to no index a huge chunk, right? Because we want to avoid suffering from index bloat. Well, what is it? Index bloat is this idea that a site ends up having an excessive number of low value pages indexed. And this is very, very common, like especially when you think about large, not specifically car aggregator is just one example, but if you think of like property websites or travel websites as well, like they tend to have this problem consistently. So if we go ahead and we no index a huge chunk, what happens then is we could miss out on ranking potential, right? Like we might not end up ranking for a lot of really important geolocations or filter combinations or car listing pages, right? So this, again, it's just not an option here. So I think the main question, and this is something that I always spend a lot of time doing when I analyze aggregator websites, is really try to understand like how and where should I draw the line? How and where do I draw the line around what I want surfaced? What is it that I want Google to crawl? What is it that I want Google to index? So let's analyze some data, right? Because we're not going to be able to answer any of those questions without analyzing data. So what is the high-level KPI that we're being measured against, right? And, as SEOs, we might right away think, oh, is it rank? Is it sessions? Is it visibility? But it's not going to be any of those, because your high-level KPI is always something that's tied to the business high-level KPI. So it's probably organic leads, right? Or revenue. It's always going to be something that's tied to how the business makes money. So in our specific example, how do we get a lead? Well, a lead happens if a user finds a car they're interested in and they choose to contact a seller. Great, that's marked as a lead at that point. So that is conversion, right? That is to say that this traffic that came through has converted. So what we really need to do to put rules in place is to try to tie these two together, right? Tie our index pages with our organic leads. So let's go back to this list, right? We said this is absolutely everything that can be seen on our website. If I try to translate that into a table, because then it makes a lot of sense, this is what it's going to kind of look like. So I'm going to end up having like these 4 core templates. So one being, your car search pages. So car search pages is the result pages. So a user searches for cars by location, for example. So they want to buy a car in a specific city. And this is what comes up, and it includes all the search filters and everything. And then the next step usually is a template called like a car listing page. So a user picks a specific car to learn more about it. And this happens to then be your listing page. Car history page is a little bit further from that journey. This is information pages in general, and it includes like car valuation, car history, and so forth. And then everything else, right? Like we can just have a template called other, which, can have things like your homepage, it can have things like your about page, and so forth. So what we now need to do is we need to figure out like which one of these templates provides the most value. And what we can do, what kind of data we can derive is on a template basis, we can understand, well, what's the number of index pages for that template? And what's the number of organic sessions? And what's the number of organic leads? And what we can do is we can just make sure that like our date range is consistent. So we can take like past 12 months data, for example. But more importantly is this idea of like percentage from total. And the reason being is we're going to end up with a table like this. So if I just put like numbers in here, it wouldn't really make sense because I wouldn't be able to compare it with all the other templates as a whole. But once I put numbers in, it became a little bit clearer. And I'll show you in this slide here, where, for example, our car search pages, which are on top there, we can see that in total, they represent 35% of our index pages, but they actually drive in 75% of our leads. So that's massive, right? That's like a really, really, really big chunk. But then on the other hand, like all the way down there, right? Those are like our car history pages. And those represent almost half of our index pages, but they only drive in like 1% of leads, which is tiny, right? That's really, really, really small. So it's always interesting once you do that data and you do this comparison to be able to see like what it looks like on a, and the reason, I have organic sessions data here for the sake of being interested into how much traffic comes in. But at the end of the day, I know that my main KPI, like what really matters is my organic leads. All right. So, I mean, you can't help but think at that point, like, wouldn't it be better, if we spread out our link equity across more valuable pages, right? And wouldn't it be better, right, if we have Google crawl our most valuable pages? And I think the crux of it really is it really worth doubling up our number of index pages for only 1% of organic leads, right? Because if we look back here again, our car history pages represent almost half of our index pages, right? But they only bring in like 1% of leads. So is it worth it, right? Do we really double up our index pages just for that 1% of organic leads? So the core of it is, websites do not need to have every single page indexed. And instead, what we should do is we should focus on indexing pages that have the potential, right, to provide good search results. So this is a fairly straightforward example, but the thing is, like, every single aggregator site tends to have one of these. And even though I'm using like car aggregator as an example, this is seen all across like different industries. You can definitely see that in fashion. You can definitely see that in e-commerce overall. You can see that in property. Property is a really, really popular one as well. And the thing is, this is only like step one, because there's so much more dissecting on a template by template basis that we can continue doing. So for example, we set our car search pages as a whole, right? They have 35% index pages and they bring in 75% of leads. But car search pages by themselves have all of these index filters underneath them, right? They've got make, they've got model, they've got year, type, and so forth. And if we look at how many filters are underneath each one of those categories, this is what it kind of looks like. Let's say we have 10 make, and 10 years and 5 engine sizes and 10 colors. If we calculate, like if we multiply this, that's, over 800,000. That's like close to 1 million, right? Potential index pages purely based on these search result filters. Like, do we really need all of these indexed? So it's fundamental that we break this down to the next level. So just like we did with step one, we do that again. And it would end up being something like that, where we'd break car search pages into every single filter. We'd understand how many index pages as a percentage total comes from that, and how many leads does it have. And what we can do at that point is we can start making decisions, even on a filter, on like almost like a subcategory basis, as opposed to just being very, very high level. The more we slice and dice our data, like the more we'll be able to make informed decisions, right? All right, so let's recommend, okay? So we've dived into the data, we've seen what it looks like, we kind of have a really good understanding behind what some of our templates look like and what they represent. But now, like, we kind of need to start asking some of the crucial questions before we go ahead and make a recommendation. So we know that we want to do something about our car history pages. Like, You know, half of our index pages, only 1% leads. Like that's not good enough. That is not worth it. That feels like we're wasting a lot of crawl and indexability potential there, that we can, have that link equity spread across some of our other pages better. So, but it's scary, right? Because that's 10% sessions. So that's still a good number there. 10% of total organic sessions. Like that's a really scary thing for me to just get rid of, for me to say, I don't want Google indexing this anymore. So I'm very risk averse personally, but what good is 10% traffic that doesn't convert, right? Like the pages are still going to be there for users, right? But we just don't want Google to come across them anymore. So they are useful because anyone can look up info, via a car registration number. But to be on the safe side, we just need to do a few checks, right? Just to make sure where we should go ahead and recommend like de-indexing this. All right. So my first question at that point tends to be like, well, do they take up a lot of crawl budget, right? So what we need to do is we should be analyzing our logs. We should be analyzing to understand how many visits do they even get? Like, does Google waste a lot of crawl budget on them? And let's say, for the sake of this example, we did analyze our logs and we found that, almost half, 50% of Googlebot's crawl requests are spent on our history pages, right? Well, do they rank for important terms, right? Because maybe they rank really well, and at that point, we don't want to get rid of them. We still want to have them around. But to be honest, they don't. Like we analyzed our ranking data, and we found that they barely rank for keywords that we care about. Do they have unique content? Like, is there really good content on them? Maybe there's a chance that they're going to rank better. Maybe we already invested a lot of time and resource in ranking them. Yeah, their content is unique, but it is very, very thin, right? It's only useful for users, but on a very personalized basis, and it does not convert. Well, do they have high quality backlinks, right? Like that's another question before we go ahead and de-index them. Like, do they have high quality backlinks pointing at them? Well, again, no, they barely have any backlinks. And, even when they do, like none of them are high quality. And actually, even from an internal linking perspective, if you think about it, they probably are very, very thin when it comes to how internally linked they are. So to summarize, like this is what it looks like. Our car history pages represent almost, 50% of our index pages. 50% of weekly crawl requests are spent on them. They do bring in organic sessions, about 10%, but that only ends up resulting in 1% of leads. They're quite thin content, minimal ranking, minimal backlinks. So I'm more comfortable now. Personally, I don't feel as scared anymore, and I'm happy to just go ahead and de-index them. But it's not that simple. There's like a few other steps that we need to think of and bear in mind. Are our sitemaps set in a way where they can automatically remove no index pages? When I worked on a very simple, like much more similar example to this before, we discovered by the time we put the recommendation through that our sitemaps are like super legacy. They are split into tens and tens of different sitemaps. And it wasn't as simple as if we go ahead and de-index them, our sitemaps will get automatically updated. So we ended up working an entire quarter on fixing our sitemaps before we could roll this out. So these are just things to remember and make sure that we bear in mind before we go ahead and push a recommendation like this forward. Some recommendations may feel very easy in principle, but they become very complex due to legacy code. And you tend to find that a lot with like aggregator and marketplace websites. And something else to remember is, if we go ahead and de-index them, they're not going to de-index overnight. It doesn't work that way, especially when you're working with, 50 plus million pages. It could take several months, or more for Google to actually flush them out of the index. So we definitely want to make sure that we don't simply block them from robots.txt, right? Because it should be on the roadmap down the line that they become disallowed, but we need to give it time and we need to monitor and make sure they actually get flushed out of the index before we go ahead and we block them from being crawled, right? All right, so let's prioritize now. So we know what we need to do. We've done our checks. We feel comfortable with it. We've looked at other things that could potentially get impacted, like sitemap and robots.txt. And now we want to prioritize this recommendation. So we have to drop the 100-page audit documents, because let's say we've come across this, we know it's making a severe impact, we know that this is high priority, and that why would we provide this really big recommendation alongside 50 other kind of nice to have recommendations? We need to focus on one, and just one, get it out of the way before we kind of move forward. So prioritization is key, right? And the question then becomes, well, with anything we're about to prioritize, how much of an SEO impact is this recommendation going to have? And again, it's so important for us to actually tie it to our KPI. In this case, it's our organic leads. So every single recommendation that comes out of us, being able to tie its impact with our main KPI is super important. But then it's not just about impact, right? It's also about effort. And some pieces are much easier technically to update, and others can be much more challenging and difficult, especially when you're working on like legacy code. So the second question then becomes, well, how much technical effort, is this recommendation going to take for us to implement it? And please let us not answer this on behalf of engineers, because we wouldn't want engineers or other folks to come and explain to us how much of an SEO impact something is, right? Like everyone is an expert in their own field, so we can kind of stick with that and work with people to understand from them. So what we end up having is some form of matrix along that line. So every single identified issue we have tends to then have an SEO impact and a dev effort, right? And having those together can kind of dictate a priority. This is, a lot of people use different ways for prioritization. I think t-shirt sizing is very simple, where you simply say something is a small or a medium or a large, and you can dictate that on impact and effort, and then have like an overall arching priority based on that. And, it can look something like this. So if something has a large SEO impact up top there, but it has a really small tech effort, so it can be done in like a sprint or less than a sprint, then that's definitely a high priority, right? Because that's what they say is a quick win. But then on the other hand, if something has, a small SEO impact, but then it has a large tech effort, so let's say it has something that would end up resulting in several sprints or like a big infrastructure change, in this case, like it definitely has a low priority. So this is an exercise that like SEO teams should definitely do alongside like developers or engineers in order to kind of dictate the prioritization of like some of the recommendations that come out. So, and if you want to learn more, like I have a full post up and a framework on that prioritization matrix here. All right, so let's communicate. So, we have, we know what we want to do. We know what our recommendation is. We have prioritized it. We know where it falls within the backlog, of all the other things that need to get done. So, the first thing that tends to happen, like when an SEO recommendation gets implemented, is, a senior stakeholder comes up and just asks, well, are organic leads up yet, right? So we've done this big change. We've managed to convince folks to give us the resource and the time in order to get it implemented. And we said that the reason we need to get it done in the first place is for the sake of organic leads improving. But then, so you get asked that question like the day after the SEO recommendation got implemented. And it's normal that they expect results and that they expect it really, really fast. So we need to manage expectations, right? Like before our recommendation goes live, we need to make sure we communicate before, and we communicate while we're working on things going live, whether it's in staging or after, and then communicate after, like once an implementation has gone live. And my personal motto with this stuff is this concept of, under promise and over deliver. Like that's just really, really important in order to just manage client expectations well. In our case, like de-indexing car history pages, like that was just like a stepping stone, right? It's a stepping stone for fixing technical foundation. And it's not going to magically increase our share of voice. And, communicating updates is one thing, but you need to back it up with data, right? That's the game changer. This is what makes a difference. So let's go back here for a second. Like what we were trying to do from the beginning is tie index pages with organic leads. and we knew this is what it looked like. It's so important for us to continue updating this tabular view and share it with stakeholders and explain this is how it was right before it got implemented, and this is how it is now, a month later, 2 months later, a quarter later, and so forth. And just keep everyone informed, right? Like update these metrics, update them on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. Make sure that you are showing like week on week change, and month on month change, and year on year change of like what's happening. Even some of the questions that we ask, like for technical folks, we can go ahead and we can keep people updated about what's happening to our, our crawl requests and how those have changed, and have things been flushed out of the index yet or not. And just make sure that you have dashboards that are accessible and are open and are easily, transparent and viewable. Because stakeholders in general, like they feel better knowing that the information is there. We know that we tend to send a lot of reports that might not even get checked, but it's okay. Like they feel better if they are able to fetch some of that information when needed and see it. So it's going to serve as a benchmark, right? And not just that, but actually it can be used to sign off case studies, right? For future sign off. If you have another big recommendation or a big change that you want to do, you can have that benchmark in place, and you can have that as a case study, and you can say, well, when we went ahead and we did that implementation, this is what it resulted in. So it is really, really good to keep that data open and accessible for others to see. So just one final thought before we wrap up. So, as a lot of my talks, my initial aim, was like to deliver a technical talk on how we can control crawlability and indexability. But so many smart people have already done talks about this. This is I link here to one of the best pieces around controlling crawlability and indexability. Like, Content King go through so much detail. They have a complete cheat sheet. Like, they give you a flow chart, a table in every scenario, what you can do to control crawlability and indexability. So, the technical side, like a lot of people have already talked about that and given different scenarios and different sides, and to be honest, like the actual recommendation, like that's the easy part. Like once you've done your data analysis and once you know what templates you want to target and where you want to go, like it becomes much more straightforward. But what's really difficult, like it's backing up the recommendation with data and, being able to manage stakeholders and having a lot of meetings for the sake of meetings. Like those are the really, really hard parts. And it's just really important, right, to invest time in achieving a higher level of trust with stakeholders in general. And that takes a lot of time and effort. Like it cannot be done overnight. So, it's going to make this process in general, like easier the next time around, like once we're able to achieve it once. So the past, I don't know if you've noticed, but we had a little bit over 108 slides that we just went through in the last maybe less than 30 minutes. But they were based on an example, that simply touched one metric. So all I tried to do was I tried to tie number of index pages, which is, a technical SEO metric, to organic leads, which is the KPI that matters the most to the business. So this same concept, right, you can translate that across far more SEO metrics. And I used a very simple example of a car aggregator website. But again, this same concept can be translated across a lot of different websites, whether it's website type or industry. So as SEOs, it's just really fundamental that we don't work in silos. And if you were to take away one thing from this talk, it's this idea that, we can achieve far more if we actually measure our wins using metrics that our business cares about than, ones that impact them and impact the business as a whole, as opposed to ones that only impact or organic or, as SEO by itself. So yeah, thank you so much. You can find me on Crawlina.com, which is my independent SEO consultancy. I will share in the chat and I will share on Twitter as well these slides if you want to refer to them later. I love talking about all things crawlability and indexability. It's one of my favorite topics. So if anyone has any questions or wants to reach out at any point, please do. I always love talking about this stuff. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ariz. And actually, good luck with your new brand as well. I hope you do everything great as you wish. And it was very great speech for us. And I think it was very beneficial. And also, As you may see in the right-hand side, there are some questions. If you like, I can just read some of them for you, because we have like 10-15 minutes, so I think it's enough time.
Yeah, sounds good. Let's go for it.
Great. So we have a question from James. He asked, as a newbie in the SEO industry, what would be your recommendations for me to improve myself to be a senior SEO? This is kind of a general question, but if you maybe like to share some maybe some resources to improve himself or the other people who are just newbie in the industry, would be perfect.
Yeah, definitely. More than happy. Well, thank you, James, for attending. And I think you're already doing a lot of right things by sitting and attending, different conferences and talks. So that's awesome. I think the concept of newbie and senior is just like such a wrong concept in our industry, because I've been doing this for 10 years and I still feel very new and I still tend to learn a lot of new things all the time. So that's definitely very common. Like, I think the best thing to learn things in SEO is learning by doing, right? That's what a lot of people do, is auditing different websites and working across different industries and, researching and, even coming up and doing talks, because then you have to learn what you're about to talk about. But Aleida, who I know was speaking earlier today, has a brilliant, probably one of the best learning SEO resources. And I believe it is called learnseo.io, I believe. And it's such a helpful resource because it has an entire flowchart and it takes people from beginner to intermediate to advanced, and it kind of like dives into all the different, yeah, I've got it right here. So it's like a full roadmap. So Aleida's Learning SEO Roadmap. So definitely check that out. I've added it in the chat.
Okay. I was also looking for the website as well. Then you wrote it down. Thank you. So in the next question, our attendee asked, what are the best URL structure for multilingual websites? Should we create our URLs for the language or for the country? What's your opinion? It may change case by case maybe, but
yeah, definitely. So, I mean, it's a question of so multilingual is it, or are you based in a lot of different countries? So you have a lot of different country locations. So a lot of websites tend to be set up in a way where their different countries are set up on like a subfolder structure. That tends to be like the cleanest way, and then if you have different language variations of these countries, then it's kind of like amended to it. So let's say, for example, you've got a subfolder for US, a subfolder for UK, a subfolder for Australia, right? And then Canada is a very good example because like they speak, I don't know, let's say three different languages, for example, or 2 different languages. At that point, what they would have usually is like a subfolder of, CA-EN or like CA-FR. And then you've got a lot of countries like in Europe, like Switzerland, for example, who tend to be speaking like 3 different languages. So again, a lot of the sites tend to be set up like in that subfolder structure that takes it. But yeah, definitely take like a step back and have a good understanding behind, is it more different languages, or is it more like a variation of countries, or is it like a mix of both? And, in which case, are you already starting at a point where you have different CCTLDs? So do you already have different like country code domains? So maybe then it's not such a good point to kind of convert everything into one, or maybe you don't and you're starting from scratch. So definitely a lot of like, like information architecture and like structural work that can be done from the start. But hopefully my answer helped a little bit.
Yeah, I think so, because also the examples were very great. So I think it helped him to understand it better. So the next question is, do you think using canonical tags still matters? Because I faced some problems before. Google didn't fetch the correct canonical URL. Is it better to not using it and use redirect or page migration?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Like canonical tags are really tricky because Google themselves have said, there is no guarantee they're going to be used exactly as you specify them. They might be used or they might not be used. They might be ignored. I think the problem lies into folks that sometimes use canonical tags as like the only way to dictate what the page should be. The recommendation is definitely to use them and to use them appropriately, where if it's self-referring, then it's self-referring. If it's not, then it's not. If you are not using a self-referring canonical, the question then becomes, well, why are you trying to direct authority to another page? Which then might be that the better answer is for you to set up a redirect in this case. So it is definitely a case-by-case basis, but in general, the recommendation is to use them and use them appropriately and use them in a clean way, but to not rely on them as the only thing that will dictate what Google decides to give authority to.
Yeah, thank you so much. The next question is about UX and SEO relation. Does UX really matter for SEO? Is there any ranking factors about UX and SEO relation?
Yeah, so I mean, UX definitely matters. And I think we've seen that a lot over the years. And user experience is such a big word, but when you think about some of the Google updates that came out, a lot that focus on mobile or performance or speed or so forth, that's all user experience, right? Like those are all ways of us to think about user experience. A lot of websites now, when you look at their analytics, you find that mobile usage is far higher than desktop usage. There's a lot of user experience that needs to be baked into your mobile site in order for it to be usable and in order for it to be friendly and accessible as well. So the fact that, over the past few years, Google has given a lot of time and effort and just a lot of consideration and weight to a lot of things that are UX, but maybe not being using the word UX is definitely shows that it's very, very important. So I tend to work specifically when I work with in-house folks, I tend to work very, very closely with our UX designers because they have a really good understanding as well. So they're coming for it from a user experience. I'm coming for it for an SEO. But at the end of the day, we are kind of targeting the same thing. It's the same goal. So definitely something to prioritize and think of.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with you. And our last question from Okan. Hi, Arish. Thank you for the great presentation. Do you think that is it risky to focus on only valuable pages, which is traffic expected pages, by de-indexing or blocking most of pages in order to save crawl budget? And for example, in case I scale my website down from 1 million indexable pages to 1K pages, can Google see my website smaller than my competitors who have more pages than me? So as a result, if it crawls me less than my competitors, is it possible to see drop in metrics according to your experiences?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So thank you so much, Okan, for asking it. I think quality over quantity. Quality over quantity. Let's always remember that, because the thing is, if you went ahead and you did some of the similar data analysis stuff that we just talked about, and you found that your website actually doesn't need 1 million pages indexed, 1,000 pages are the core of your website and they have everything valuable already in them, then you should just be showing these 1,000 pages. There is no reason for you to then be showing 1 million pages and having them all being called and indexed. Google isn't going to give bonus points to other websites or competitors just because they have more pages than you or just because they have higher quantity than you. Because let's say, for example, your competitors have 1 million, but then 90% of them are extremely thin or 90% of them are not valuable or so forth. But your 1,000 are super high quality, they're super focused, they have everything that is needed. So it's tricky, right? But go back to what we said in terms of diving into the metrics and understanding how much traffic do they drive, how much leads do they drive, how much revenue are we getting from them, and then based on that, make some decisions. De-indexing can be very, very scary, and sometimes it can be the other way around, where you realize I've only got 1 million pages, but actually I should have more. I need to expand because I haven't even I'm not showcasing some of these filters or so forth. So it can be this way or that way. But definitely just trust the data and make sure that you're, benchmarking and seeing how it looks across time.
Yeah. I think it was also a great question, and your answer was also very great. Thank you so much, Arish. And I think we have no more questions. If any more question, maybe on Twitter or and from your website, Crowlina, they can ask maybe. So again, thank you so much for being here with us. It means a lot to us actually. So finally, we had a chance to have you here. I hope next years again we can have you in person in Istanbul. So we would have a chance to see you in Turkey as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for tuning in, and thank you for the questions. And do please reach out via Twitter or via my website if you have any further questions.
Okay. Thank you so much again. See you later, Aris. Thank you.